Okay, in this video we're going to be discussing how to create text objects within our AutoCAD drawing, how to type text, different features of text boxes and things like that, and also cover dimensioning objects and different styles as part of that. So I've got a basic feature here that's drawn in, and let's just say we want to add some text to explain this feature or anything. There's a couple ways to do that. Like anything in AutoCAD, you can always just type, and so we can type text, just regular, and now it's similar to a text box, say in Microsoft Word or something like that. But here it wants us to specify the start point of where the text is. So just click a random spot. It asks to specify the text height. Sometimes it's hard to know based on where you're at in the world, or how big your drawing is, relative sizes, things like that. So just kind of accept the default and then specify the rotation angle of text here. We want it to go this way right now, so we're just going to leave it at 0. And now you can see we have a cursor blinking. So I'm just going to type single line text. And then I hit enter, and it gives me the option to type another line. But I'm going to hit enter again, and that will exit out of the command. Okay, so obviously this text is pretty small relative to this object we drew, say if we were wanting to add a label of some sorts. So let's zoom in. So our text object here, if we click on it, it just has one grip that we could grab, and we can move this around. Similarly, we could grab the whole thing and move it around just by left clicking and holding on there. We can also use the move command for any movement of this. As far as text goes, it works just like any other drawn feature. You can move it, you can copy it. So we could copy here similarly, and we can also rotate it, RO, and we can spin it around, things like that. Okay, so that's how we can move around our text. But as far as the actual text goes, if we click on it and we look over in our properties box, which again, if you don't have pulled up, you can just type MO for properties, and we can set basically all the same factors we could for a drawn object. So we can set it to a different color, we can set it to different layers. Line types and line type scales don't really apply too much here. But if we come down, obviously the contents are what it is written. There are multiple styles of text. Some of these are specific to our template, and some of these are just set up specifically in AutoCAD. I like using the AKS style. I think that looks the cleanest of a lot of them, but again, that's personal preference. We can set it to be annotative relative to the annotation scale of the drawing, but we don't have that set up here, so that's not too big of a deal. We can justify it. This doesn't really come into play too much within a single line text, but we will discuss this when we get into multi-line text. We can set different rotations for it. Now we could have just rotated as we discussed earlier, but we could set, say, 45. And now we can set a very specific rotation. Other things like this, okay? And we could change this to backwards or upside down, which why you would want to, I'm not sure, but that's an option. So there's a lot of ways to manipulate this text. We can set the height here. I didn't mention that, so we could change this. It's 0.12, so maybe we put this to 0.15, and now this shows up a little bit larger, closer relative to what we had drawn here. Okay, so this is very straightforward. I'm just going to delete these here. And let's try that again. So we're going to type text and say I want to label the bottom here. Now that we're specifying height, we know 0.5 is a good size. We'll want to keep the rotation angle of 0. That means it's essentially left to right. And now we can just type, say, bottom of object. Now when we hit enter the first time, it gives us a typical enter, and we can return and we can go to the next line. And so we could type next line, for instance, okay? And we could continue doing that below, okay, until we double enter, and now we're done. But I want to let you know here, now these are still 3 separate objects. Even though we type them all kind of within the same command, the command text just by itself, typing text, is single line text, meaning each line of text is a single object that you can manipulate. Okay, so let's say we want these centered, we could drag them over and do different things like that. If you're wanting to type something more on the order of a paragraph or something that needs to have multiple lines, that's when you can use M text. So I always type out the whole thing. MT is M text. I think actually just T also works for M text, but some of those overlap. It's not that with other commands, it's not that hard to just type M text. Now this time, instead of specifying a base point, it says specify the first corner. So we can click here and it says specify the opposite corner. Basically this is very, very similar to drawing a text box, say in Microsoft Word, and you can give it the size. Now there's a lot of other options here below that you can set: the height, justification, line spacing, rotation, all these different things. Now we can set that now, or you could actually go back in and set it later. So we're just going to click here, and now it actually gives us a guide. So we could type, so we'll just say multi-line text example bottom of object. And now again we double enter, but that doesn't get us out of this command. We can just keep entering forever and it just keeps going down. But this works again like a paragraph. Double enter. Okay, to get out of a multi-line text command, obviously you can always right click, hit cancel, or you can just hit escape. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. It's kind of an annoying feature in a way of text versus multi-line text, that to reiterate, to get out of a single line text command you have to hit double enter. To get out of a multi-line text command you have to hit escape. But now you can see we have this object, and now instead of just one grip edit, now we can move this. We can move this whole thing with that grip. We have 2 separate grips for width and height that we could change. And similarly to the text, now you'll note here when we highlight this, this is M text, not text. Again, we can change colors, set layers, things like that, set the style. Now this is where justifying would make a little bit more sense, because this is basically a paragraph. So we can do top left, or I can move it all to the center, bottom left, bottom right, all those kinds of things. Okay, I can change the direction of the words. That's pretty weird to do it that way. We can change height, rotation, all those same things. And you can actually put a frame around this text down here. And you can actually set this where it breaks up into multiple columns if you would like. So there's a lot more options for manipulating multi-line text or M text. So that's a basic overview of text. It's not too complicated of an issue, but I just wanted to show you how it's done, some of the different options within there. If you don't like typing commands, all the text commands and options can be found up here under the Annotate tab, and then right here is the text kind of box. So here, if you just click this A, it automatically goes into a multi-line text, or if you hit the drop down, you can do multi-line or single line, and you see how that works different. And again, you could go ahead and set some of your standards beforehand. You can set your style, set your height. One other nice thing you can do within the Annotate box is you can search your entire drawing for certain text. Let's say I want to find enter. And similar to a search or find and replace within Microsoft Word or other programs, it'll find them. It'll find the next one, and you can actually replace these with different things. So you can search either specific objects, the current layout, or the entire drawing. So this can be really handy, specifically if you had a really big drawing and you knew there was a certain phrase or wording, maybe you misspelled or you typed the wrong thing, but you want to search and replace the whole drawing, and that's a really easy way to do that. And it's a really nice feature that has only been around for a little while. So the next thing, I'm just going to get rid of this. The next thing I want to discuss is dimensions. And right next to the text box on the Annotate tab is a dimensions box. So say we wanted to dimension this object, and that is to add dimensions in text form so we can see what this object, the size of it. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. You could just type dim, and that's the dimension, generic dimension command. And you can go through and there's all the different options for how we do that. But what I like to use, again, you can come in here and set your different styles. We'll again stick with the AKS. And right in here are all your different options. And this is what I like to look for. This drawing, these lines are all drawn in orthogonal view. So, except, for the angled ones. So we could just use a linear dimension. So if we started, now we could turn on our O-snap by F3, and I could just click from this endpoint to this endpoint, and come down here and select that. Now, just real quick, looking at the features of a dimension object. So if we click on this, again, in our properties, we can look at a bunch of different things. We have a style, again, the full range for the general, all the layers, colors, things like that, line types. We can change the different style. We can change whether it's annotative or not. And again, that's kind of a topic for a different time, but it's how it stays relative to the scale of the drawing. And some features to notice. Obviously, we have arrows on each side. You can change the style of those arrows depending on your preferences or what type of work you're doing. Architectural, surveying versus civil drawings can be a lot different how they do that. You can change the size of the arrows. We can make them a little bit smaller. And we can also turn on or off the actual dimension lines. Okay. And one thing you'll note that isn't here is the lines sticking down here, and these are called the extension lines. So we could turn those on. And we can also move these around. We can move this line up and down. We can move this around. We can also change how long the extension lines are, how far they go past here. We can change how far offset they are from the object here. So we'll put those back a little bit further down. We can go in and change all the different things about the text, the style of the text, position. We can do text view direction, depending on whether we want it to be right to left, left to right. Again, when you're labeling things, sometimes the way you drew it is upside down, so you need to switch that around. Yeah, and so there's a lot of different options within here to manipulate this. Let me put this back so it makes sense. Okay, and so that's our basic overview of a general dimension. Now we can continue with our linear dimensions. We can work our way around of anything that looks linear. Okay, so again, it's based on the style that I'm using. It doesn't automatically put up these extension lines, so I could change to a different style here. Let's try that and see if that, and now they automatically come up. So a lot of that's based on your own settings. Some other things like here, when you want to dimension a smaller space that maybe you don't have room to fit the number in, for one, we'll turn the extension lines on, but we could move this in here, and maybe we could actually rotate it. Oh, that's the wrong way. That's 270. So the trick here, when you want to put it perfectly left to right, you want it to be basically at 0, but you have to kind of trick it just a little bit. And so you have to put maybe 1 minute in there to get it to go exactly left to right, because 0 is the default, but that's, unless you put something in there, it doesn't override the default. So that's kind of a little trick there. And so now that fits in there a lot better, and so that's a better view of it. We could make some adjustments here, or maybe make this one smaller to fit in here, but we'll just take it out for now. There are other ways we can dimension things. So we have a curve here, so we could measure the radius of that curve or that arc. And again, there's different styles here. We can put it here where we have an arrow emanating from the center point. Sometimes you can have a marker right on the center point. So there's a lot of different ways there, but you can move these and manipulate these, but you can dimension this or this arc as well, the radius of this arc. So thinking about this angle here, there's a couple different things we could do here. We could go to the angular. Now we can measure this angle in between here. So in the way I did that is it says select arc, circle or line you want your angle from. So if it's 2 lines, you click the first line and then the second line. So we could actually come in here and do this one. Now obviously these look really crappy right now, and we would want to go in and adjust all the settings based on that. But this is just kind of a quick overview of how to do angular dimensions. But one thing I do want to point out real quick, let's say we wanted the length of this line. So we go back to our linear and we click here and we click here. But that's not the actual length. If you see, it when you use the linear command, you're staying basically in orthographic projection. So it only measures in the X direction or the Y direction. It doesn't understand how to go along this line, essentially perpendicular to this line. So for that, we actually need to use the aligned dimension style. We can still click our two endpoints here, and now it lines up perfectly with the actual length of that line, and our dimension is perpendicular to that. So that's basically just a real quick overview of text and dimensionings. I do want to point out, beyond actual drawing of the dimensions, I don't believe we've discussed yet how to just measure objects. And what I like to use is the MEA command, so the measure geom command, and then it gives you all the different options for measuring a distance, a radius, angle, area. So we could actually measure the area of this by just, well, obviously that corner is harder to hit, but we can measure that internal area. Now on a polygon, I will point out, if you just click on it, in your properties it will actually tell you the area and then the length of the perimeter. But again, MEA, there's a lot of different options. We can measure radius by just clicking on this arc. It tells us right here. We can measure the angle, again, of these two lines. And so we can do that for any of them. And that's a quick, easy way to actually get your measurements without having to dimension. But otherwise, that's a quick overview of text and dimensioning. And so that should be the end of this lesson. Thanks.